Have you ever written up an employee and then felt sick like right after delivering it when they walked out of the office? Well, most manufacturing leaders reach for progressive discipline. It'll hold the team accountable, but write ups don't build accountability. They break trust, they disengage your best people, and they quietly cost you the performance that you're trying to get. And after 25 years of running plants and a decade of coaching manufacturing leaders, I call this the accountability gap. And today I'm going to show you 3 questions that you can use to close it without ever sliding this letter across the table. And it all started when this woman, Tammy, was driving out of her parking lot with the middle finger up, and everything went really sideways. And that was the last time I ever saw her. So I have these cautionary tales. I was in the situation where I thought that was the only option. My boss was putting the pressure on me all of a sudden. I was a manager and I had people above me. And it was basically, yeah, this person needs to go. Trevor, I was transferring to another division. So I thought, I really don't have a choice here. But I did have a choice. And I made a bad choice because there was not those conversations. There wasn't the deeper conversations. When we talk about what's really going on, right? When we really get curious, because this whole concept, we talk about being curious. I wonder why that person's not performing. I wonder what else could be going on. And for me, it got more procedural and it got to be some selfishness too, right? Where, hey, somebody needed something from me. Hey, I just need you to do this. Okay. Well, it's a big deal when we don't see it coming, and that person didn't see it coming. And I own that. And I don't blame that on my boss. I really look back, and that was a significant emotional event that I'll never forget. And she probably never will either. And I can't take that back. I can talk about it on the show today of what for you not to do and what you can do instead. Because really, this accountability gap, it's just the space between what we want people to do and what they're actually doing. And that's what we want to close. And on the other episodes, we talked about the first 2 gaps of this whole manufacturing greatness model, which is the showing up gap, the space between how we think we show up, our intentions, versus how people are experiencing us, their perceptions. And then we talked about in another podcast episode, the second gap, the expectation gap, the space between what we expect of others and what they believe is expected. And the third gap is the accountability gap. And if you've done the first 2 well, the accountability gets a lot simpler because I like to call it transparent accountability. So we're just talking about, do we agree this is the expectation? We talked about that last episode and some of the complications. The gap's not the same size for everybody and it continues through those conversations. But without those honest conversations of what's really going on, it'll blow up like it did for me. And I was like, okay, I'm never gonna be in that situation again. And I wasn't. And that really changed me as a person. When you do something, when you take an action that you look at and it's like, geez, that was a bad choice. I made a bad choice as a leader and I ended up following the norm, which isn't what the company needed. It isn't what I needed. It isn't what she needed. And it wasn't the right thing to do. So now I've got this experience and we have different options. And I see it elsewhere too. I'm not the only one. It might have happened to you. You might have had that feeling after writing someone up. And it's not about even the write up. It's about the delivery. It's about the conversation. It's about the curiosity. I had another supervisor that had gotten written up and was ready to, I'm not going to do anything extra for anybody anymore. I was late on something and I got this documentation. And the issue wasn't the documentation. It was just the old slide the paper across the table. Hey, yeah, this is late on this. This is just something we got to do. I know you'll be fine. But it wasn't about that. We can't just erase everything that someone did that was good because they did something that was not to standard. So we got to go back. What was the expectations? What's the repeated behavior? What's the deeper conversation around that? Or at least having that conversation. I appreciate the consistency of accountability, but when we skip the conversation, we don't get to the root cause and we end up solving the same problem over and over again. And that's the opposite of what we want in this accountability gap. If we truly close this out, then we can look at it as just a conversation. So a few questions you can ask. A performance issue should be something where behavior changes, right? Because you hire good people, you train them, you put them in a position of success, you have those conversations. And if something does go right, then just sit down with the person. The easiest question is, what's going on? Because often people will know there's some level of accountability going on here, and that may open up the door. Sometimes you need to say less. Sometimes it's kind of like, hey, I really got to let this person know that X is not good. They missed doing that audit. But they already know that. So you don't need to reinforce it. Figure out what got in the way of doing that audit. And when you can do that, then you got something going on. So your second question is, what would make this successful? Or what specifically would ensure that you don't miss that audit again? Like, what got in the way? What was more important? If we go in there with that attitude of curiosity, we can figure this out. And then you can just ask, is there anything we could do, or what could you do right now to address that? So we can put it back to the individual. We may need to support in some way. It depends on that context, but you're going to find out more when you come at it with the spirit of curiosity. These aren't soft conversations, but they're respectful, right? You're coming at it with curiosity, believing that we all do want to do our best. And if we come in with that, we'll find out what's really going on. And sometimes that leads to past separating, and that's okay. We can part on good notes if we need to do that. But really, can we bring the best out of each other? Can we make those expectations clear? Can we do that in such a way that it builds trust? Because I believe the more accountable that we are to each other, the better the trust. And the better the trust, the better that we can build teams that work together, that get results, and they stick around because they know what to expect. And they know that the other star players in your organization, they're being held accountable as well. So it doesn't really matter. We just kind of have those same expectations of each other, regardless of position. So people don't resist accountability. They resist judgment and shame. And when accountability comes from curiosity instead of control, everything's going to change for you. You probably are doing levels of this all the time. Can we do it more often? Because I say, let's leverage the resources we already have. We don't need a new team. We need a new conversation. And all it takes is 3 conversations. I was talking to someone else this morning about group conversations versus individual conversations. When the whole group or 2 people are accountable, nobody's accountable sometimes, right? Because we're not clear on who's responsible for what. So narrowing that down, having that clear conversation, having that transparency, building the trust, getting the momentum, closing the accountability gap. Then you end up having employee accountability. And that's what manufacturing leadership is about. It's not about progressive discipline. There's not too many fans of that, right? So I hope that this has given you some ideas on some transparent accountability for your frontline supervisors, for your talking to your plant manager, if you're one, and just build that trust, increase your performance, and let's just have a change in behavior to get a better result. Hope you enjoyed this. We've talked about all 3 gaps now in the manufacturing greatness model. If you go to manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe, I'll give you 10 more questions in addition to these 3 that you can keep asking, right? You can keep going deeper and you get to the root cause and you won't be solving the same problem again. This is the Manufacturing Greatness Podcast. Thanks for joining us.